Hello everyone, my name is Geri Vistein and I am a conservation biologist living and working in Maine. And the focus of my work is carnivores and us. And Coyote is the totem carnivore, the teacher of all things in this human-carnivore relationship, which you will see in my talk today. But before we begin, I just want to let you know that we are just touching the tip of the iceberg in my short talk today. So at the very end of my talk, I will share with you my educational website and the book that I authored for the people, so that you can go there for yourself and learn more. And so with that, let's begin. So the beginning of my talk is Coyote, America's Songdog. And why did I give it this title? So coyotes live nowhere else but in North America, and they have lived here for over 5 million years. And their paws have been more or less going all over this continent during that time. So let's take a look at this continent that Coyote has called home. So this is the American continent, okay? And just to show you where Coyote has been wandering in these 5 million years, let's take a look. Archaeologists, as they're digging up here and there along the continent, are finding some secrets. And so they are finding coyote bones in New Brunswick. They are finding coyote bones in New Jersey. They are finding ancient coyote bones in the caves in Tennessee. And let's cross over to the other side of the continent in California, in the tar pits. There, so many large species that are now extinct, like mastodons, the great camels, ancient horses, and their predators, the dire wolves and the big cats, they're all gone. But guess who else is in there with them? Yes, coyote bones. So all of them have gone extinct, but not Coyote. Coyote still is here. So in our last glacial age, okay, what happened is that is when humans started to come across the Bering Strait. 17,000 years ago, we believe, around that time. And as they came down towards the end of the last glacial age, this is where they found the coyotes, in this prairie area of North America, in this area like of southern Canada, Saskatchewan, all the way down through and into Mexico. This was where Coyote was living at that time when humans first arrived. So if there was any more native species in North America, it is coyotes. Their paws, I think, have touched upon every inch of this continent. So let's go back to Coyote the Songdog. So coyotes are often referred to as the Songdog. The reason being, they have the largest repertoire of singing that any land mammal in North America. And people often wonder what it is that they're up to when they're howling. Well, you know, there's a professor at the University of Vermont who did his doctorate in coyote howling, and it took him 6 years. It was in California. And he said at the end of those 6 years, he says, I barely touched the tip of the iceberg. So coyote howling actually is coyotes' ancient language, and that they have evolved over 5 million years. And we actually know very little of it, even after all this research, but we are finding out some things. So let me share those with you. Three different aspects. So first of all, coyote howling has to do with territorialness. So coyotes, like wolves and many other species, including ourselves, are territorial. And so when you hear coyotes howling during the night, they are expressing to other coyotes that may be living near them, and we're talking coyote families. These are coyote families talking to other coyote families. This is our home, we're here. And sometimes in some areas, people actually can hear them respond back and forth to each other. And what we're finding is that coyotes communicate with each other. They don't do war. So they're a very highly evolved species that let each other know, this is my home, this is where we live. And so that is often maybe what you'd be hearing during the evening and nighttime. Another reason why coyotes howl, coyotes don't have cell phones, okay? They have something better. So sometimes in moist evenings, especially here in Maine, coyotes can hear each other howling over 3 miles away. Wow. And so when they're howling, when a coyote who's a 3 distance away from other family members, the family members know who's howling. They know their voice. They know what they're saying. And they know the urgency of it, or just a happy share. That's pretty neat, isn't it? And lastly, what we know is coyotes howl because they are highly social species. Their family means everything to them, and they like to celebrate it, just like we do. And so oftentimes when here in the evening, when you hear this really rollicking carrying on, I would say that very probably you're hearing coyotes celebrating themselves. So we can't talk about coyotes howling without listening to a bit of it here, wouldn't you say? So I'm going to share with you a short clip. It's just a little bit over a minute, and we're going to go to a beaver pond where this was taped in upstate New York at 2 a.m. in the morning. So I would encourage you, close your eyes, take yourself to the edge of the beaver pond, sit down, and drink in the Songdog. Are you ready? So who do you see? You know, often in our relationships as humans, the reality that we perceive and the real reality out there is often 2 different things, as we all well know. And that has to do with our relationships with our fellow humans as well as our wild kin. And so I say, who do you see? Or who have you learned to see? So the cultures that we live in have a powerful effect on how we see other life that we share our planet with. So I wanted to share with you 2 different cultures who have lived here on our North American continent. First of all, our native peoples, and then the Europeans that came and invaded North America further down the line. So our native peoples, well, first of all, our native peoples gave Coyote his name. And it was given by the Aztecs of Mexico. As you will note, see this stonework? This is an ancient Aztec stonework honoring coyotes. And so they often also gave Coyote their name, and you can see it spelled here in their native language. And it is pronounced Coyote, Coyote. And the meaning of Coyote is very significant to our native peoples. It means the trickster. So in our European worldview, the trickster is kind of this silly little person. But native peoples, the trickster was a very important, almost semi-god individual. And reason being is they saw them as the ones who took their communications from themselves and their communities to the gods. So Coyote played this role as they saw them. And so, you know, when our native peoples came to this continent, they got to live alongside this wild coyote, this native wild dog, and they got to know him and respect him. And so this is why they gave them that name. The Navajo of the Southwest, even today, call Coyote God's dog. And again, the concept is that Coyote is the one that goes between themselves and speaks between themselves and the gods. Powerful person. However, also their belief is that Coyote belongs to no one but to God. So I want to share something very special with you with our native peoples. Another aspect of our native people's culture was their oral language that they passed down. So it's like the history that we as Europeans descend, we write down, they spoke it, and they passed it down. So it was actually historical events. And so native peoples passed down Coyote's curative power and Coyote's benevolence to them. Historically, we're hearing this over and over again. And here you see an illustration drawn by Olaus Murray, who was a wildlife biologist, very enlightened, way ahead of his time in the last century. And he drew this illustration of a coyote striving to heal a Native American hunter that had been injured. Native peoples also passed down that when any of them were separated from their village, and they were in danger or injured or hurt and couldn't get back, what happened, and they passed this down over and over again, is the coyote family would circle them and protect them from any of the large other carnivores from injuring them until they could safely make it home again. Also passed down that they would escort little children back to their families. And so you go, oh, sure, yes. Oh, sure, yes. Well, I only have time to share one story with you, but this is, I think, is an amazing one. Are you ready? So about 5 years ago, I saw this article in the Sun paper here in Maine, and the title of it was called Night of Terror. And this is what it was about. This young man in wintertime decided that as it getting close to dusk that he was going to go out in his snowmobile. And so he gets on his snowmobile and he starts picking up his speed, going faster and faster and faster until he lost control of his snowmobile. Hit a great pine. The snowmobile came and landed on both his legs and broke both of his legs, and he was pinned under the snowmobile. So night came, and he was screaming and crying for help. Of course, no one was there. It was nighttime. And so he stayed there all night. And in the morning, he was closer to the road than he was aware. People heard him, and off he went to be cared for. But he told the story of this is what happened during the night. During the night, when he was crying out for help, do you know who came? Coyotes came. The coyotes came and they circled him. And they stayed there all night until they heard the humans talking, and then they left. It's like, wow. Coyotes have not changed in their benevolence to us, despite 200 years of persecution towards them. Powerful story, isn't it? our Native Americans' relationship with them. So Native peoples, as we know, the land was part of their culture. It was who they were. And the wild beings they shared it with were part of who they were too. They needed to be there. And so I want to share with you the very end of a poem, a long poem written by a Native American poet of today called Del Himes. And this is how he ends his poem and expresses the Native people's respect for coyotes. Never will he go from this land. Here always. As long as the land is, that's how Coyote is in the land. But then there came a great change to the New World. And of course, we know it wasn't a new world, just a new world to the Europeans. So back up a little bit now in history, okay? Here's the other culture that's coming to the North American continent. And we look at history as a prism through which we can look into the future. So we look back at what happened, we can understand more of our perspectives and our behaviors of today. So when the European invasion of the New World was that Europeans not only brought themselves, they also brought their belongings, and they brought their animals, and they also brought their worldviews. Let's take a look at their worldviews. And remember, their worldviews actually gave birth during the Greco-Roman time of man being separate from the earth, and grew and developed more and more in Europe. And then they brought this to the New World. This was their worldview. And I want you to think about, as you're seeing this, I wonder, is this alive and well today? And also the contrast between our native culture. So we are separate from the rest of the world. Powerful worldview of the European worldview. Native peoples, we are part and parcel of the natural world. We are one. We are above all other life. The native peoples, we are part of all other life. All life is here for us, Native peoples, to honor and reverence all other life. And we can use it any way we wish. And of course, Native peoples was to have great respect for how they used it, great reciprocity. And finally, we can use it up now. And the Native peoples always spoke, whatever we do, what are we leaving for the seventh generation? So their worldviews permeated their behaviors toward the land and its life. So just a little bit of an example here. So here's the forest, and don't we Mainers love our forests here in Maine, all times of the year. So historians say that when Europeans would see something like this, they go, that's a wasteland. Why? It's not being used up. You ready? This is how they saw how it should be. So you cut down all those trees, because there's a wasteland, and you cover the landscape with herbivores, monocultures of herbivores, okay? And no one else is allowed to be there. No other life, only them. This is the concept of how to be on the land that Europeans brought over. And they started here in New England and the Atlantic coast and went across the country in doing so. So as they maneuvered through the West into the Serengeti, beautiful prairies of North America, you know, and so many Americans know, that our billions of bison were slaughtered. Only a small number of them were saved and brought into Yellowstone, still recovering, okay? And instead, they brought millions and billions of non-native cows and sheep that basically destroyed the Serengeti of North America. So what's happening during this time of European crossing the continent, and we're talking a very short period of time of 200-300 years, for what have developed and evolved for thousands of years on this American continent, is that there was great destruction of all the wildlife that was here, and the predators as well. And the thing is, when they were killing all the bison, all these other prey, and deer and antelope, they were killing the prey of the predators. And then what they were doing was surrounding them with non-native cows and sheep. And so the predators were starving to death. And so where do you think they went for food? Yeah, they were set up for it. So the cattle and sheep barons perceived all carnivores as a roadblock to amassing their health. You know, great wealth, initially, Europeans had this concept, a very big part was making big money from early on. And so what happened in the West, in reference to the killing of our carnivores, was supported by Great Britain and Wall Street. It was big money in it. And no one was going to stop the big money. Does that sound familiar, right? And so these powerful barons went to the federal government and says, you got to give us lots and lots of money because we want every single carnivore or other species that's in the way of what we want to do eradicated. So predator control and its violence to life was imposed on this fragile complexity of life that had evolved over thousands of years. And within a short period of time of less than 200, it was destroyed. So we know the wolves were exterminated, American falcons, golden eagles, grizzly bears pushed back to small little areas, cougars pushed back to the mountains, on and on with our carnivores and other species as well. And however, Coyote was the survivor. Even though all this was same kind of persecution was added to them, Coyotes made it through it somehow, as they always have. And so coyotes, here we come again to the American continent. So when coyotes saw their habitat change, that included their fellow species that they lived among, they changed their habits again, as they've been doing for 5 million years. So here they are in the prairie areas, going up until Alaska, over the Rockies, down into Mexico further. Now they're in Panama, went across the Mississippi, then east. Our coyotes here in Maine came through the Great Lakes. They were females. They met up with Algonquin wolves in Algonquin Provincial Park. And then both species were severely persecuted. And as a result, here's a male Algonquin wolf looking for a mate. He can't find one. And here comes female coyotes. Yes, they mated because they could, because they're very, very close as a species. And their progeny then traveled down to New England, New Brunswick, all of New York, all of that area of the East. And so from the Southwest, and here's the coyotes. This is what they look like, 20-pounders, huh? Look at their coats. They adapted their coats. They're not that thick there. And look at the areas where they lived. They adapted their prey there too. And from the Southwest to the forests of the Northeast and to Maine. And of course there's something else missing in this photo, isn't it? Lots and lots of snow. So coyotes, in the short period of time of less than a century, far less than a century, have totally adapted again to brand new habitats. Note the coyotes here. These are our eastern coyotes that live here in Maine. Note their size, somewhere between 40, 50 pounds. And look at their fur coats, okay? And note the habitat they're living in. And they adjust their habitat also with their prey. A biologist that has done immense research on coyotes in Yellowstone calls coyote the incredible masterpiece of evolution. And so coyote is functioning as the keystone here in the East and in Maine. Keystone. Whenever they are hunting and effectively kill one of their prey, they're affecting the whole system all the way through and through. They play an extremely important role. So here you see coyote doing their thing with rodent patrol, which is one of their things that they like to do the most, and they're adept at. What they're doing is balancing populations and controlling disease. This is a really important role of major carnivores. Okay? And so mice are, and all kinds of rodents are an important part of coyotes' prey, and they carry a lot of disease. And of course, here we know here in Maine, it is the Lyme disease. And we not only have Lyme disease, it's an epidemic. And why is it an epidemic? Coyotes are really not being allowed to play the role they're supposed to. We'll talk a little bit about it. Coyote also relates as a major carnivore to smaller carnivores like raccoons, foxes, and skunks, doing the same thing, balancing their populations and controlling disease. Okay? And the diseases that these particular species struggle from and are very sensitive to is rabies. And it can spread widely around where humans live, reason being these species live a lot like where humans live and eat, and where humans live is a lot of food, a lot of trash. So controlling their populations is really important. Coyote controls foxes' populations more because fox is a canine too, a much smaller canine. So they recognize this bigger canine coyote and respect their habitats, so tend not to be always where coyotes are. And big role that coyotes play here in Maine, if we allow them, is controlling the deer populations and their behaviors. Deer are big herbivores, large herbivores, and they can have a very great effect on the green areas of the land. So they can destroy the habitat of birds, bees, butterflies, are insectivores and are pollinators by literally eating the understory of our forests and areas. So coyote controlling deer populations and also changing their movements, making deer move is extremely important. But in doing so also create healthier deer herds. Our deer have been without their carnivore for 150 years. They need coyotes here. So we've just spoken so much about this important carnivore, or do our laws protect them? So these are the hunting regulations of Maine. They can be killed year-round, you can kill them at night, you can chase them to exhaustion with dogs, and let's have killing games for fun. So I ask you, are these regulations, are they permission for crime? And I would also question, are these hunting regulations? Because traditional hunting, this is not traditional hunting, okay? Traditional hunting, two big aspects of traditional hunting is respect and restraint. This is about violence and lack of restraint. Do we need to change this? Do we need to change this in our time? So Coyote is giving us a chance to reconsider our relationship. Oh, we know what happened in the past, but I'm coming now. What do you think? You think we can change our relationship? So what's our answer to Coyote? Big way of doing it is support protection of Coyote by law. Allow them to be the Keystone. Allow them to bring health to the landscape and us. Allow them to live their lives in peace. So I ask you, again, who do you see? Or who have you learned to see? Thank you. So before I leave you, I wanted to share with you an educational website that I created for our people. It's called CoyoteLivesInMaine.org. Go there and adventure in yourself, and you'll find lots more of awe and wonder of our native wild dog of North America. And this is the photo of the front cover of my book, I Am Coyote, that I wrote for the people of Maine and all the people in the East, actually. This short little time I've had with you, this book goes into more detail of what happened in the past. How did coyotes get here? And what are they doing when they're here? And it's all told in story form, but historically accurate and ecologically science-based, all through the eyes of a young female coyote. Enjoy, delight. You can get it through Amazon and every bookstore in North America, in the United States and Canada you can order it from. Thank you. Thank you.